Hello, I'm Troy Schneider from the New America Foundation. I'm here with my colleague Stephen Hill, the author of the just published book, Europe's Promise. And Stephen, one of the things that you raise early in the book that I found particularly interesting is that we think of Europe as being the old world, but that the European Union is really a fairly new creation, and that a lot of things that Americans think they know about Europe are simply no longer true.
Yes, I think that's pretty much what I found in my research. Europe is kind of the new kid on the block. It's created a whole new set of institutions in this post-World War II period. It's really kind of transformed itself in a way that I think it creates a model for how a modern society can develop and take care of its people in a way that is ecologically sustainable. And those are the two challenges of the times today: the economic crisis and how do we continue to develop the world, and secondly, how do we do that in a way that doesn't exacerbate global warming. So I think in that way, Europe really is setting a new standard for us.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the economy side of things. And to take care of your people, you have to be able to have the business, have the growth, have the GDP to take care of the populace. And one of the sort of conventional wisdoms about Europe is that it hasn't done a very good job on that. That unemployment's too high, and there are too many restrictions against capitalism and entrepreneurialism. That it's this very sort of stagnant, overly socialist place that makes it hard to get ahead.
Well, yeah, let's look at that. I mean, what you find when you really look at the numbers is that they don't hold up to much scrutiny. Europe has created a brand of what I call in the book social capitalism, as opposed to what some have called in the United States Wall Street capitalism, in which it's a very robust form of capitalism. This is not socialism at all. Europe, for example, has the largest economy in the world. Europe creates a third of the world's economy. It's actually larger than the United States and China combined, which a lot of people don't realize. Europe has more Fortune 500 companies than China and the United States combined. So these are very much capitalist economies that are wealthy. Their growth from 1998 to 2008 as a continent was actually a little bit higher than our growth when you measure it by GDP per capita. Mm-hmm. The land that we used to call high unemployment now has lower unemployment than we have in the United States. So a lot of these myths are being turned on their heads, month after month, especially after the current economic crisis. And so what I've saw was that Europe, as this land of social capitalism, what they've learned to do is to take the ability of capitalism to create wealth, which is substantial, mm-hmm. and to harness that in a way that they create this more broadly shared prosperity. And that really has been the key to Europe's wealth and to having such a wealthy and productive populace.
The other point you raised was the environmental aspect and being able to do this in a way that's sustainable. And the obvious place to look there is when it comes to clean energy and transportation policies. What's Europe doing that the United States can learn from?
Well, Europe has implemented in a widespread manner a lot of the new conservation and renewable technologies that are available today, including new green design, low wattage light bulbs, low flush toilets, motion sensor lights, so lights turn off. You don't have downtown buildings go on all throughout the night. But in addition, some of the bigger things, like they've implemented solar power in a much a more robust manner than we have in the U.S. Wind power, sea power. One of my favorite examples is they have these things called sea snakes, where you have these huge tubes floating in the ocean. They're about 100 meters long and 12 meters in diameter, and they're just bobbing in the waves with a piston inside that's creating energy as they're bobbing in the waves. And they're able to connect those to the shore and produce endless power. So they're doing a lot of things like this that I think when more people know about it, they're quite impressed. And in addition, their homes are smaller, their vehicles are smaller, their homes are better insulated. I mean, some of it, this is not a lot of it high-tech stuff. Mm-hmm. It's just implementing available technology, the low-hanging fruit, in a way that makes their energy usage and their carbon emissions a lot less. In fact, Europe at this point has an ecological footprint, as it's called, that's half of the United States, even though we have the same standard of living.
Interesting. At New America several months back, we did an event about Europe's energy policies, and they talked a little bit about feed-in tariffs and the way that sort of sparked renewable energy and made it just much more sustainable in those communities. But one of the things that critics raised was the issue of cost. I mean, you know, it is literally a feed-in tariff, and it gets to the question of, does it raise costs of energy? And in Europe, the conventional wisdom is that how do you pay for all this stuff? That it's this overly taxed society where they're paying, you know, 2-3 times as much of their income in taxes as Americans do. How do you square that with what Americans are willing to pay and sort of how we want to arrange our economy?
Well, in a couple ways. When it comes to energy and transportation, the slogan is tax what you burn and not what you earn. So in other words, you can use taxes or regulations to encourage certain behaviors and discourage other behaviors. There's no question in this era of global warming, we have to discourage some of the use of technologies and transportation means and other things that do burn a lot more carbon. But you can make it all revenue neutral. You can reduce other taxes as you're increasing regulations or carbon taxes or whatever. In terms of the overall tax picture, it's actually a myth that Europeans pay more taxes than Americans, because when you look at what Europeans are getting for their taxes, they're getting things like health care, like free or nearly free university education, a more generous retirement. They're getting more vacations. They're getting paid sick leaves, paid parental leaves. They're getting, Europeans spend a lot more public dollars on their senior care for taking care of their elderly people than we do. They put more into affordable housing than we do. And so for Americans to receive the same level of benefits, of supports, for families and workers to receive these levels of supports, we would have to pay for a lot of this out of pocket. And so what you see is a lot of Americans are paying for daycare out of pocket, and they are paying more for university out of pocket. And they're, a lot of America is one of 5 countries in the world that has no paid sick leave. And so a lot of employees have to self-finance their own sick leave. When they get sick, they have to take a day off from work. So when you add all of these things up, both not only taxes paid, but what people are paying for out of pocket, what you discover is that Americans really don't pay any less than Europeans. We just get a lot less for our money. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, you see that maybe we can really start stepping back from these myths and start having a better dialogue about how do we create a society that better supports families, better supports individuals in this age of globalized capitalism.
And I guess that's the key question: is how do we create this? If Americans and their political leaders want to make changes, want to learn from Europe, what does that take? Is it specific policies? Is it a different mindset? What would be your advice on how to act on some of your findings?
Well, I think it starts with different policies, new policies, and it starts, I think, to some degree with your values and what you value. And just to give one example, the European healthcare system, it's actually not all socialized medicine as the myth says. The countries like France and Germany and Switzerland and Belgium actually don't have socialized medicine at all. They have private insurance companies, but they're nonprofits, as opposed to the United States, where the insurance companies are for-profits. And then they negotiate the costs every year or two. Every service and fee is negotiated between all the stakeholders in the healthcare system, including consumer representatives, to come up with fees that are reasonable for all. It's kind of like how we do with healthcare. So what they're saying in their healthcare system, the value is to have healthcare for people instead of for profits. Whereas in the U.S. healthcare system, it's really more about profits and what the insurance companies want than people. That's why you have pre-existing conditions and all these other clauses that basically make it so the insurance companies can deny care. So it starts to some degree with having the right values. And once you have those values in place, then you have the policies and regulations that go along with those values. We can evolve there, I think, as a society and as a country. The current debate on health care is trying to push us in a new direction, but there's a lot of pushback because of powerful political forces.
Interesting. Well, you raised a lot of really interesting ideas in the book, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today about them.
Thank you, Troy. My pleasure.
You bet. Thanks a lot.